Welcome back to Embody Radio, where excellence isn't an accident, it's something you live. Today, we are here for a nerdy girl deep dive on something that you may have heard of, but maybe not heard of recently or heard of its importance. I know I heard of astaxanthin a long time ago and antioxidants and all of those, kind of mystical health and wellness things. But our guest today, David Wadmel, is somebody that's brought a lot of science to that space and has done a lot of breakthroughs, I would say, in the longevity space, in the antioxidant space. So just to kind of start things off, astaxanthin is something that has a lot of clinical research behind it. I think it's over a decade at this point, well over a decade, multiple decades. See, he's already know. Thousands of studies, I think over 100 human clinical trials in it. So we've got a lot of research on it, but we haven't seen it cross the mainstream yet. So we'll get into that more as we go, but kind of give us an overview for astaxanthin. What problem as an antioxidant does it solve, and why does that matter?
Yeah, it's very different than other antioxidants because it actually gets to where it needs to be. So it gets into the cellular membranes, but not just the outer cellular membrane. It gets to the nuclear membrane, the mitochondrial membranes, and it's distributed throughout the whole body. So it gets to all of your key, organs and tissues, gets into all the membranes within the cells, and then perfectly spans those membranes. Other antioxidants like vitamin C might sit outside the membrane, or vitamin E or beta carotene get in the membrane, but they don't actually span across the full structure of the membrane. And astaxanthin, based on its structure, perfectly spans that membrane like a bridge or like an anchor and physically stabilizes it, but also prevents the oxidation of the lipids in the membranes, which when they become oxidized, the cell can become damaged and no longer function the way that it's intended to. So that is very unique compared to other antioxidants. And on top of that, it's really potent at actually fighting free radicals and reactive oxygen species.
Beautiful. So you talked about oxidative stress, oxidative damage, reactive oxygen species. I think these are also all words that we've kind of heard and we're like, we know this is bad. But it's something that we don't, again, fully understand. We don't know why it's bad, or we think that's like a later in life problem, like kind of like we were talking about before the show. I'm like, I'm 30. Like, when do I really need to start worrying about this? So I also think too, though, in our kind of modern culture, even with people my age and sometimes even younger, we're incurring more oxidative stress as a culture than we have in decades, if not hundreds of years. So can you give us, just explain it to me like I'm 5. What is oxidative stress? Yeah. And then why is that bad for us?
Yeah, so it's kind of a normal byproduct of living, and it can happen from a variety of different reasons. So for instance, sunlight exposure. When the sunlight, the UV light hits your skin, it penetrates into the skin cells, and certain molecules are photosensitive and they absorb some of that sunlight and they become like higher energy states and kind of like little Tasmanian devils that want to cause damage, and they can react with oxygen to create a high energy level of oxygen called singlet oxygen. And this oxygen can go and damage, your lipids, your proteins, the DNA in your cells. These are all the things that make up your cells and make up who you are. And so it's like if you're a house and your walls start to crumble, that's bad. Yeah. And so in the case of that singlet oxygen, which is a type of reactive oxygen species, astaxanthin can actually go and absorb that energy that otherwise would have, damaged your lipids or your proteins or your DNA, and take that energy. And actually the molecule of astaxanthin has a long backbone and these ring groups on the end. It can actually vibrate and dissipate the energy as in heat safely, and then but not be reactive and damage other things in the cell. But otherwise, if that were to just be kind of unaddressed, those singlet oxygens could go in and impact this cascade of events. And so if your lipids become oxidized, your membranes become damaged, you can have a cascade of inflammatory processes that happen and then damage the cell further. And so that's one type of reactive oxygen species that, when not addressed, because your body has built-in defense mechanisms to try to fight these things, but based on aging or poor diet, lifestyle, environmental factors, all these things can impact your body's ability to deal with things like singlet oxygen. And so when that happens and you have too much, that's not being attended to by your internal systems, you have oxidative stress, which is like too much of these reactive oxygen species. Another way that you have it is just a normal byproduct of energy production in your cells. So in the mitochondria, the power plants of your cells, basically you have like this assembly line of electrons that are being moved along and lead to the energy production process. But a normal byproduct of that are these electrons fall off the line and then react with oxygen. And because oxygen is very electron hungry, and so they become these free radicals where they have unpaired electrons in their atomic structure, and then they're going out and looking to steal an electron from something else. Again, like the lipids or the proteins or the DNA, the either the structural or functional components of your cells. And so these reactive oxygen species, or in particular these free radicals that are missing an electron, go and try to steal an electron from somewhere, which again is a normal byproduct of energy production, and you have built-in antioxidants to deal with that. But again, with aging, with environmental factors, poor diet, lifestyle, all these things, your built-in systems are weakened. And then now you have these rampant free radicals. That is what is oxidative stress. It's too much of these things going around. You have a bad problem. Again, with astaxanthin, it goes in and actually can donate an electron to the free radical and kind of, in essence, sacrifice itself, but it actually doesn't. It doesn't die, basically. It's like it jumps in, kind of like a little Superman, and says, here, take this. And so now the free radical is happy. It's not going to go and steal, electron from somewhere else. And then astaxanthin, because of its structure, can absorb that loss of that electron without becoming reactive to damage other things. Like in
that
the
was
case
going to be
of
a follow-up question, because aren't there some antioxidants that can become damaging?
They can be a pro-oxidant. And even say like the lipids in your membranes, if you have a free radical that steals an electron from one of those lipids in your membrane, which is a key structural component of the membrane, then that lipid becomes its own radical and then steals an electron from its neighbor, and then they steal it from their next neighbor. And so you get this like wildfire of this cascade of lipid peroxidation or oxidation of the lipids in your membrane. And astaxanthin gets in there almost spanning that membrane perfectly as like a fire break that just grabs or donates an electron to one of those free radicals, stops the wildfire in its tracks so the lipids don't further oxidize. And then actually vitamin C plays a helping role where it comes in and gives astaxanthin an electron to go back to normal. And then vitamin C gets recharged by glutathione, one of your built-in antioxidants.
We've all heard of that one.
They all work in harmony. And so it's a really cool process. But again, to get back to your question about oxidative stress, the issue is sunlight exposure, environmental exposure, energy production. All of these things have a natural tendency to lead to the production of these reactive oxygen species or free radicals that, again, can be addressed by internal systems, but if not properly, maintained at appropriate levels, can lead to oxidative stress, which is too much of these free radicals or reactive oxygen species that cause all types of issues and cause chronic inflammation and aging and brain fog and everything.
Yeah. Okay. So some follow-up questions based on that. Because kind of, again, like we were talking about before the show, a lot of people that listen to this, they're fitness enthusiasts, wellness enthusiasts, like go-getters, that kind of thing. And so I think it would be really easy for that population, even I've fallen into this category where it's like, oh, I do so much for my health. Like, of course I'm fine. Of course I don't have like an overburden of oxidative stress or whatever. So what would you say in modern culture? I know you mentioned just diet, lifestyle, all of that stuff, but specifics. What are some of the top sources of oxidative stress that you've seen, especially in that younger, like young professional, people that aren't necessarily like at the point where they're worried about aging yet, but maybe some things that would spark some self-reflection in the listeners?
Well, intense exercise, is a strong insult to the system. And again, some of that is good, but a lot of it can cause damage internally to tissues and recovery times and endurance. And so exercise itself, can cause oxidative stress. Poor diets like inflammatory foods, processed foods, things like that can lead to oxidative stress and inflammation.
Does alcohol fall into that?
Alcohol, yes. And so alcohol, when it's metabolized in the liver, can produce these free radicals as part of just the metabolism process. Even if people are carrying adipose tissue, fat tissue, that itself can generate like, inflammation, oxidative stress. And so it's also like immune response. And so like in the case of COVID or any type of just, response to an infection, your body will actually produce reactive oxygen species to help kill off the invaders. And so, but the problem is sometimes that process doesn't shut down. And so people experience a tail of symptoms after where the body's still generating these things that were meant to kill off the invaders, which are now gone, but now they're just damaging, yourself internally.
Real quick, would you say that's similar with like autoimmune disease as well, where it's like more chronic?
Yeah, it's basically your immune system is attacking yourself rather than outside invaders. And so it's kind of like your military is attacking your citizens rather than, invaders. And so that's a problem. It's like a misdirection of resources.
Yeah.
Another thing is, psychological stress, whether it's relationships or social media or world events. And so I think in the past, it was almost like out of sight, out of mind, you kind of like a little bit oblivious, kind of pre the real explosion of social media and internet and everything where, you're aware of certain things in the world, but you weren't maybe as tuned in. And but I think now in current days, you are, on social media, you are seeing what's happening,
You're
you're going through your feed and you're
Right.
seeing, something cute and beautiful, inspiring. And then the next thing you're seeing someone that's, assaulted or whatever it may be. And it's just a shock in the system that's not normal. And so I think that can, definitely cause, that psychological stress leads to oxidative stress, inflammation internally.
Absolutely.
Because your body is just sensing all of these things from the outside. It's programmed to survive, and so these stresses, that we're kind of artificially imposing on ourselves are causing our bodies to react and be kind of, on a high level of sensitivity and then, kind of fight or flight and react to this. And this is triggering these systems in our body that cause oxidative stress and inflammation as well.
Absolutely. You use one of the favorite buzzwords in the industry right now. It's inflammation. And it's so funny because I am so passionate about that, but then it gets like distorted into this other thing over here. So with inflammation, so first off, I think one of the primary blood markers we look at for inflammation is something like CRP. But I'll even say, for example, get a client where their CRP is normal, but I can visually and visibly see that there is whole body inflammation there. So can you speak to just inflammation in a general sense more? And I think too, something else that's happened, which I don't want to get too tangential with this, but from the training aspect, a lot of women are like, oh, well, training makes me inflamed. I'm like, well, that's part of the process. It's supposed to drop off, but you need that inflammatory process to get the benefit of training. Now, if it doesn't drop off, that's a bigger problem. So can you speak to just kind of, I guess, the broader and more specific topic of inflammation? And maybe if you've seen or heard of any cases where kind of like I mentioned, maybe we don't see a high CRP on like blood labs, but that person is actively experiencing, whether it's visual or like just symptoms we can see, like this person is very inflamed.
Yeah, so hsCRP is a protein in the liver that's produced in response to inflammation. It's kind of systemic. It's really tied in a lot with cardiovascular health. It's been shown that if you reduce hsCRP below 2 or even below 1, that you can reduce your risk of major adverse cardiovascular events by like 25%, even independent of lipids. So people always think of cholesterol as being bad, and there's a lot of science around that. But even if your cholesterol is managed properly according to kind of current standards, you can still be inflamed, and then that can lead to heart issues. Because there's a lot of people that have heart attacks and strokes that have perfectly fine cholesterol, but it's because of inflammation that causes a lot of issues. And so that's a lot where hsCRP comes into play, just as kind of being supported by some major clinical studies. But there's other measures or biomarkers of inflammation, like TNF alpha or other inflammatory cytokines, like for instance, that are targets of arthritis drugs or other types of autoimmune drugs. So you may have one thing that looks okay, but there could be another measure that you're just not seeing.
Would those ones that you just mentioned kind of be more specific? Like you're not going to see them on a standard panel?
Yeah, and so hsCRP is commonly available. Most diagnostic labs will have that, and it's affordable, and it may already be in one's blood work, and they may not even realize it, or they can ask for it, but it should be pretty accessible. But other things like a full inflammatory panel with like TNF alpha, COX-2, other interleukins, those things will typically not be available in the common everyday like neighborhood diagnostic labs. But there's fortunately, not a lot of advances in diagnostic testing, and people can get better handle on their inflammatory biomarkers and try to get those into ranges that are good. But it's also important to note that you don't want to just knock out that completely, because some anti-inflammatories work by going in and just inhibiting something or activating something chronically, and that's not how your body was meant to function. Like maybe, you have some elevated TNF alpha that's leading to some joint issues, but the solution is not to prevent TNF alpha from ever being produced, because it's part of your body's natural immune response, and so you become at risk for infection, because inflammation is that's your body's immune response to fighting off bacteria, viruses, injuries, healing attacking all these things. That's your kind of first responders come in and kind of kill off, the bad guys, and then maybe tear down, cellular walls that are, infected, and then rebuild them. And that's what the process is. And so it's healthy and you want it. You just don't want it attacking healthy cells, and so, so the more data you can get, the better. And then you can try to attack it from, proper diet, exercise, sleep, supplementation, and then try to, keep your inflammation, at levels that are healthy, because you want to fight off infections. You want to wound heal. You just don't want that chronic smoldering inflammation that takes a toll on you over years and decades. And so, it's not something that, I'll deal with the inflammation, when I'm whatever, 50, 60, 70, 80. It's like, no, it starts now. And, think about like if you go and buy a new car, you can have two cars that one person takes care of their car, gets it serviced, washes it, keeps it protected, garage clean, whatever. And then you have others who just leave it outside, don't ever service it, drive it hard. And those two cars can look very different after 20, 30 years.
One's wheezing to the shop.
It's, you have black smoke coming out the exhaust. And so that's all, something that starts, from the beginning. And so you don't want to wait until the car is breaking down and needs to be completely restored or taken to the junkyard. You want to actually maintain it. And that's the same as our bodies. So it starts now for everyone, whatever now is. If you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is, it's never too early to start.
Absolutely. Ooh, you kind of started covering one of my questions I have for later, but we'll come back to that. So actually on the question of inflammation as it relates to astaxanthin, is it something where, I don't even know how to word this appropriately, but astaxanthin can be sort of a thermostat for it? Like it doesn't allow the process to be fully shut down to like that negative place like we talked about, but like just enough anti-inflammatory effect for it to be helpful. Is that question kind of landing? I don't know how to phrase that appropriately, but how does it help to optimize that process, I guess, and maybe optimize like that cell permeability like you were talking about?
So I think it's helpful to understand that inflammation is not just turned on and off. And so it's a matter of, okay, well, I got to, dial it down to just this level so it's healthy. Your inflammation, which if you think of as like, your army or your first responders, it can be activated by different reasons. And so if you have a virus or a bacteria coming in and you have that infection, like it can be activated in response to that, or an injury, a wound. But it can also be activated by oxidative stress. And so it's sensitive. You have immune cells that are, searching, for signals of danger. And if there's oxidative stress, it thinks, there's a problem. And then it wants to come and, fix it. But that can actually exacerbate the problem, because your inflammation can actually come in. Your immune cells can actually create their own free radicals as like little weapons to try kill off the invaders again. And so like your body can produce internally like basically like bleach to, kill in the cell walls, things. And it's really interesting what your body does. And so astaxanthin, because it gets rid of the oxidative stress, prevents that pathological activation of the inflammatory pathways when you don't want it to be happening, but it doesn't prevent the activation in response to, outside viruses, bacteria, parasites, fungal infections, wounds, those types of things. So it kind of works upstream, and kind of dictates whether it gets activated in a good way or a bad way. Whereas other anti-inflammatory drugs may just shut it down completely, so it just doesn't activate at all, like corticosteroids, which can be very effective at reducing inflammation, but then now you don't have an immune response to anything.
Right. We created another problem. To solve
You're going to die
problem.
from an infection, even though your joints feel good. And so, but also you can have other anti-inflammatory drugs that work downstream. So after the inflammation, has already been activated for one reason or another, it doesn't really, kind of parse that out. It just says, inflammation has been turned on. Certain things are being, produced, certain inflammatory cytokines. Let's go in and just block that one thing, but it's just blocking it regardless of why it's been turned on. And so again, maybe it addresses the issue you're having, but now it won't be able to respond appropriately in natural, healthy ways. And so that's kind of too late. It's not the ideal way to target inflammation. And so that's why astaxanthin can be so safe, but still be an anti-inflammatory, because it's working upstream and just allowing it to activate when it needs and kind of restoring that normal cellular function rather than doing something that's not as nature intended in your cells.
I'm glad you said that, because I was like, it's going to feel so weird to say, like, it feels like a more natural process, but it feels more aligned with how the human body functions. And like, I love pharmaceuticals. Like, we need them for very specific things, but like, especially for something like daily care, it's like, oh, how do I augment and support my system in the way that it was supposed to run?
Yeah, because that's the problem is your normal, cellular function just degrades over time and things stop working, and people have crutches and workarounds and maybe pharmaceutical interventions maybe go in and target one thing, but it's a whack-a-mole because then now this other thing pops up and you're not restoring normal function and kind of homeostasis and balance in the cells. And that's really more how astaxanthin works, is protecting the components of your cells from oxidative damage, protecting against the unwanted inflammation and helping to modulate some of those longevity pathways that deal with aging and, for instance, like cellular cleanup, like autophagy, where you recycle old damaged cellular components, or mitophagy, which is the same thing, but in the mitochondria, where you have old mitochondria that have, damaged components that need to get recycled. And if they build up, that can, lead to inefficient energy production and unhealthy mitochondria. So it helps to promote cleanup of the mitochondrial damaged components, senescent cells that are kind of like old cells that should have been kind of killed off and taken away, but they're kind of just left there, zombie-like cells that are producing, bad actors, inflammatory cytokines that then damage, other tissues around. And so astaxanthin basically says, okay, let's just allow things to function normally. You have a dysfunctional environment for whatever reason. Let's, help protect, the cells and allow them to kind of go back to just working normally. So it's not something that's going to, make someone live to 200 or have superhuman strength or endurance, but it's like, okay, let's be the best version of yourself. And that's really what it's about.
Absolutely. With the mitophagy component, what might make somebody's system kind of bad at that? What might make someone have poor clearance of those, whether it's regular cells, mitochondrial cells, like whatever it is? Because that's another thing that I think, especially as things like fasting and ketones and all of that have gotten more popular, excuse me, people don't know. I might be bad at this.
Yeah. No, but the oxidative stress and inflammation are the things that lead to those issues. And so like in your mitochondria, if the cellular membranes or the membranes of the mitochondria become damaged, they're no longer producing energy as efficiently. And if the membranes are damaged, they can leak certain, things out that trigger problem, danger. And then there's a response to that comes in and, tries to take out the mitochondria, which otherwise could have been healthy, but, sent out this distress signal because it was damaged. And so that can lead to dysfunctional mitochondria. And now you're no longer cleaning up, you're killing off old mitochondria, for example, that maybe, should have been healthy, or you're not producing new mitochondria because your body is, think about like a state of emergency where, rather than focusing on the things that matter, you're just in this state of emergency where your body is running around trying to fix problems that may not even be there. And so your normal functions like cleanup get kind of pushed aside and then other things are happening internally that are not good.
Yeah, absolutely. So and I love that we're circling around this. So for a lot of people, again, I think like this population of people, and for women especially, we're very, very tough. And we can override things that we're experiencing in our bodies for sake of getting something done, for sake of a goal, whatever. So let's say somebody doesn't have access to advanced lab testing, but if they could get really, really honest with themselves about maybe symptoms that they're experiencing that could be indicative of oxidative stress. Obviously, we have like the Spider-Man meme of like, is it this, is it this, is it that? There's a bajillion different things that could be happening, but what might be some core symptoms someone might be dealing with in their day-to-day life that could maybe point to, this is something you should look at?
Well, oxidative stress and inflammation can manifest themselves in different ways in your body depending on where they're kind of happening, because certain areas of your body may be more prone because they may be already a slightly more weakened state. And so now if there's some oxidative stress or inflammation, it kind of creates more of an issue there. And so it could be, how your joints feel if you're not feeling like as comfortable or as mobile, but also can be brain fog. It can be, it impacts mental health. And so, if you're, kind of more upset or not as happy with life and everything, I mean, that can be impacted by oxidative stress and inflammation in the brain. So kind of your state, your moods, but also, like cognition itself is impacted. So whether it's brain fog or just your ability, memory, attention, focus, all of these things, skin health, so oxidative stress and inflammation can lead to poorer skin in terms of, moisture content, wrinkles, elasticity. So you can see it there. Endurance, recovery, sleep, if you're getting poor sleep, if you're unable to be as effective at whatever activities you're doing, so all these things you can be impacted by oxidative stress and inflammation. I think the problem is a lot of people just push through and maybe just get used to like the new normal. Like,
right,
oh, this is just how it is. And
it's just, I'm getting older. Meanwhile, you're like 30. And it's like, girlfriend, we just got started. What do you mean? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
We're just going to accept that?
Yeah, and just, take some energy drink or whatever and try to power through.
I'm so glad you said that. Like, if you need that 3 p.m. Alani, we probably have a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And that's not real energy.
Yeah,
that's
you're kind of stealing from the future to power now, and it's not, kind of natural, healthy energy. And so it's like, okay, let's actually help your body's natural energy production just be as efficient as possible, rather than an artificial boost that is just going to make you even more tired down, the road. And then you're kind of always chasing after, and you're always behind. And so you just got to get in front of it. And that's why, I'm not like a coffee drinker or energy drinker. I mean, it's just like, it's for me, it makes me jittery, but also I just feel like it's kind of like, not cheating, it's just not the right way. It's not even the optimal way, to exist.
Right. See, I love the ritual of coffee.
Sure.
Like, I'm like, I don't need this.
I love tasty drinks. Yeah.
What is your tasty drink of choice?
Well, I love kombucha, which has some caffeine. But I'm always looking for the booches at the, if love we're out and about. Yeah.
Love that. That's a very wholesome answer.
Yeah.
Okay, with astaxanthin. So obviously we've got a lot of applications. Is this something that our bodies produce, or is it something that we can only get exogenously?
Yeah, we have to consume it. Unfortunately, our bodies don't produce it. Unfortunately, we are not microalgae, which produce astaxanthin. But it's really cool because astaxanthin is part of the carotenoid family, which includes beta-carotene and lutein and zeaxanthin. And so these are all things that co-evolved with photosynthesis and, protect plants and microalgae from environmental stress like UV light from the sun. And so this particular type of microalgae is a green algae, but then when it's stressed by the sunlight, like for instance in Kona on the big island of Hawaii, where I first was introduced to this and worked in the production in the ponds growing this particular type of microalgae, this green algae turns bright red when it internally produces astaxanthin as a defense mechanism against that UV light from the potential damage from the UV light. And so nature came up with this as a way to protect, critical plants and microalgae and this whole family of molecules. But astaxanthin is kind of like in the evolutionary tree of carotenoids, like the most evolved form. If you look at the molecular structure, it's been optimized from the earlier carotenoids like lycopene or even beta-carotene. And it has these certain oxygen-containing groups on the terminal ring groups of the molecule that actually are what allow it to span across the membrane and stay locked into the membrane based on the chemistry of kind of the phosphate groups and the lipids and everything in the cellular membranes. It actually allows it to perfectly lock in across the membrane, whereas other carotenoids like beta-carotene, if someone were to Google beta-carotene chemical or molecular structure, astaxanthin structure, they almost look the same, but there's just little differences that, primarily chemists would recognize that actually makes it completely different in terms of how it kind of orients in the membrane, and then also how it fights free radicals and makes it one of the most potent scavengers of singlet oxygen or quenchers and kind of dealing with other free radicals. And so it makes it super potent, but also physically how it aligns in the membranes. And so algae produce it, and it works its way up the food chain. And so it's what makes, shrimp, crab, lobster, salmon, gives them their pink, red, beautiful coloration.
That pretty color that we like. Yeah.
Even flamingos are pink because of astaxanthin, because they consume crustaceans in their diet. And so it's something that, just is so prevalent throughout the marine food chain. In krill, even whales, krill is a huge part of their diet. So it's so ubiquitous throughout the marine environment. And it really is more than just color. I mean, that's kind of like almost a byproduct, but it has all of these benefits. And so then for us, if we eat salmon, that's probably the best dietary source of it.
How are we looking in terms of like quantity relative to what we need? Because that's where the difference comes in.
It's technically possible to get what you get from one, say, 12 milligram capsule, like a standard dose of astaxanthin in a supplement form. but you'd have to take wild sockeye salmon, which is really, concentrated with astaxanthin, but eat
and
like
much fishier.
much fishier, more strong tasting. Yeah, not a favorite of a lot of people. You have to eat about a pound of that to get like 12 milligrams. Yeah, to get a daily dose. And a lot of people take more than 12 milligrams. That's just like a baseline dose. And if you like Atlantic salmon, which is more mild and it's not as deep color, it doesn't have as much astaxanthin in there, you have to eat more like 4 to 5 pounds. So it's a lot, but with that said, just a normal meal of salmon is good because you are getting some astaxanthin and
omega-3s,
and some omega-3s and all of that. And so, it's definitely healthy. And salmon is one of my favorite proteins or kind of foods in general. But yeah, you're just not going to get the levels that are necessarily, optimal.
Right. Absolutely. And like, I'm big on, especially with clients, I'm like, hey, we want to get as much, like food first as much as we can. But there are certain instances where it's just like, it is going to be easier for you and your life and your planning and all of the things if we just get this from an outside source. Even most of my clients take an omega-3 because they're like, I don't really eat a lot of salmon or whatever else, sardines. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's just do this. And especially if it's easy to fit into a routine, and we'll talk more about AX3, I'm sure, as we go. But I'm like, these capsules are so tiny. They're so easy. Like my fiance cannot swallow a pill. And I'm like, you could do this. It's so easy.
It's not like a big fish oil pill. But also the capsules can be opened up and the powder inside is water dispersible. So even if someone can't even swallow a small capsule, you can just mix it in water and it'll turn bright red like Kool-Aid.
That's dope.
But it just won't taste or smell like anything. It's just very strange. So if you were to put it in your capsule and shake, or in your bottle and shake it up, it would just turn bright red. And so it's just, but it doesn't taste or smell. It's not fishy or anything. And so people can mix it in just as long as they're okay with the red coloration.
A little spice, a little pep in your step.
But speaking of omega-3s, so those omega-3s help to replenish the fats in the lipids in your membranes, but they are prone to oxidation just based on their structure. They're just perfectly designed to be attacked by free radicals, unfortunately. It also gives them their flexibility, for membrane function, because there needs to be some permeability and flexibility for membranes to function, to bring nutrients in and out and to signal and all types of things. But they can become oxidized. And like I said earlier, it's kind of like that wildfire, like a forest. All of your lipids are like trees in the forest and they can become oxidized and damaged. And that's, really a bad thing. And so astaxanthin really complements omega-3 as well, because it can help to protect them from being oxidized in those membranes. Interestingly, kind of a related thing, when astaxanthin is absorbed, it goes to your liver and then gets packaged into your lipoproteins like LDL and HDL. And so people think of LDL as like, oh, that's the bad cholesterol. Basically is the lipoprotein that contains, cholesterol that has a long time been associated, with like building up plaque in the arteries and all this stuff. But the real issue is if the LDL becomes oxidized, because the LDL itself is prone to oxidation, and astaxanthin naturally is packaged into LDL in the liver and then uses that as a transport vehicle throughout the body. And so while it's going there along the way, it's protecting the LDL from being oxidized, because if your oxidized LDL is increased, that puts you at big risk of these like foam cells that are sticky and build up plaque and then are prone to rupture. And so it's really the quality of your LDL that really matters. And we have human data showing reductions in oxidized LDL in addition to animal. And so, so it protects all of these critical things from oxidation. And so, but again, people are taking omega-3s. That's great, but let's just complement it with astaxanthin to help protect against oxidation.
Well, and you never know, like, hopefully you have a great quality fish oil that hasn't been sitting on a shelf for several months. But so let's say like somebody maybe does, or they've had theirs in their cabinet, they don't keep it in their fridge, whatever, can taking the astaxanthin alongside it just help prevent any of the negative stuff that might happen if it's just been sitting around for a while? Or is the best
I mean, if
form?
It's already oxidized, you probably don't want to be taking it, but it's more like once it's in your system. So it can either be oxidized sitting on the shelf or in the manufacturing process, or it can be oxidized in your body. And both are bad. And so you want a high quality source that's not oxidized. So you're putting a good thing into your body. But then once it's in there, you want to protect that. If you were to co-formulate omega-3s with astaxanthin like in the oil, that could potentially help the stability. And people do put other antioxidants with omega-3s to help. Even with astaxanthin, we include some vitamin C and vitamin E to be sacrificial antioxidants on the shelf. And so they can kind of be frontline. And they're just like, okay,
take me.
Kill me. they're like little bodyguards. And so
I
basically
was
then
gonna
the
say, they're like the
astaxanthin,
bouncers.
yeah,
going with
yeah.
the club.
But they're basically protecting the astaxanthin so that it doesn't kind of waste itself fighting like unnecessary
Yeah.
oxidants, like, on the shelf, and it saves it for in your body. Yeah. So.
That is dope.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. There's so many cool things here. So, kind of core, like we talked about a little bit, interests of this audience. We love the physical performance. We love the mental performance. So, from a brain perspective, astaxanthin can do some pretty cool things. It promotes neuroplasticity, neuroprotection, neuroregeneration. Can you speak to that a little bit and kind of
Yeah.
how it does that? It also does some cool things. It's one of few things that actually crosses our blood-brain barrier.
Hmm.
That's another one of those things that I think we hear and we don't know what that means or why that's important. So I'm just going to let you rip on the brain stuff.
Yeah, so the brain is obviously a highly privileged location because you don't want crap getting in there,
Right.
because, your brain is very sensitive. And so only certain things are allowed in. So it's kind of like you mentioned bouncers. It's like a very VIP club to get in. And just given astaxanthin structure, it can get through the membrane into the brain. So it crosses that blood-brain barrier, and it's allowed in because it's the right type of structure. And then it's absorbed into the brain tissue and gets into all of those key cells and those membranes within the cells, and protects against damage, but also promotes health like neurogenesis, production of new brain cells or neuroplasticity. It increases BDNF, which is a brain-derived
Neurotropic factor,
yeah, BDNF, and that promotes brain cell growth as well. And so being in the brain is something that's very special, and allows you to rewire and have that neuroplasticity. If your synapses and everything are functioning as they should, you can have that plasticity to allow you to kind of continue to evolve over time and not be kind of rigid and
Stuck.
suffering from cognitive decline.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even the blood retinal barrier to the eye,
Yeah.
astaxanthin can get through there as well and protect all the tissues in the eye. Because the macula, the back part of the eye, actually has receptors to specifically absorb two relatives of astaxanthin called lutein and zeaxanthin that absorb blue light and protect your eyes against blue light damage. But astaxanthin doesn't have specific receptors to go into the macula, but instead gets distributed throughout all the tissues in the eye, and protects them against oxidative stress and inflammation. So they actually really go hand in hand for that damage potentially to the eye. And so going back to the brain, there's data in animals, showing neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, but then in humans, there's human studies showing like cognitive tests where they, look at a maze or, look at different, cards, or trying to look, did I see this before or not? And so memory, recall, attention, all of that was improved. Information processing was improved in human studies with like validated, questionnaires that are used or tests for these types of things.
That's incredible.
So brain function, but also like cognitive decline, neurodegeneration, all of these things happen over time with oxidative stress and inflammation in the brain. Like neural inflammation is a really bad thing, and people talk about as underlying a lot of these disorders. And so if you can keep your brain happy and not oxidized and not inflamed, you're going to put yourself in the best position to promote and maintain that brain health, in addition to the performance of improved cognition at this time. So it's kind of like
we could all use that.
Higher performance now, and then longer term health, over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen anything, obviously with like the brain, memory, cognition, performance side of things? Have you seen anything on like the mental health side of things? So anxiety, depression, like kind of mental health disorders?
Yeah. So we haven't, there haven't been specific studies. There have been some things like looking at improved sleep in people that have, mental health challenges, that, sleep was improved. But mechanistically, it does make sense that, because oxidative stress and inflammation do tie into mental health, that there could be benefits there, but there haven't been large scale clinical studies looking at specifically, mental health outcomes.
Yeah.
But it would make sense that this would support that given its mechanism.
Yeah. I'll say I've taken it for like a month and I'm way more chill.
Yeah.
And that's like a weird thing for me. I have a very anxious, fast brain. And so I'm just like, oh, it's kind of quiet in here.
Yeah.
Or like I'm not as reactive to things. And I'm like, who knows what that's from? But I was just like, this is interesting.
Yeah, there's some data on mood and things. It's more like hardcore outcomes for specific mental health disorders that there's not data on. But yeah, improved mood and sleep, which goes hand in hand, all that there's some data there for sure.
Question on, so like we have branches when we're talking about things. We have like, okay, somebody has a problem. We're working on lessening that problem. We're talking about prevention of a problem. So like ounce of prevention, pound to cure, whatever. And then we're talking about optimization. So I want to take it from maybe the lens of somebody that's actively dealing with, like, say we have a mom and she's no longer breastfeeding, but she has like a 1.5, 2-year-old, not sleeping well. She's got a lot of stress going on. She's got her job, her relationship, all of the things. Is that a use case where somebody that is presumably under a lot of oxidative stress, because poor sleep, stress, all of the things, that even if nothing else improved, and I know that's a huge ask, but if nothing else improved, like dietarily, she wasn't getting more sleep, things like that, would she see a benefit?
Yeah, we haven't done that specific study.
Right, yeah, I know that's very niche. Niche. This is your best guess.
Yeah. No, but yeah, mechanistically, it makes sense that it would be helpful there. And again, the big levers are sleep and nutrition, exercise, stress management, social connection, all of these things. But again, if you're doing as much as you can, or you just can't do some of these things because you're waking up in the middle of the night for bringing up a child, then this could definitely help. And so even in nature, looking at the salmon, they swim upstream to reproduce, and it's this amazing miracle, in nature, like this strenuous journey, and they're basically wasting away. So they're not able to eat right. Their muscles are wasting away just to get to the destination to reproduce. And then when they do reproduce, they transfer the astaxanthin to the eggs to protect, and that's why the salmon eggs are red.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so it protects them against the damage of the UV light, but also helps them in their development.
Wow.
And even for, your example was a mother kind of post birth and even post breastfeeding, but even for reproductive health, like ovarian health, egg health, all of these things are kind of oxygen hungry, and you can have oxidative stress in those areas that impacts reproduction. And so there's data showing reproductive health outcomes in women, but also in males, sperm health, all of that. There's kind of male and female reproductive health benefits related to oxidative stress and inflammation, in the reproductive organs.
Wow. I'm not going to lie. It covers a lot.
It does.
It seems like, which is kind of like, the eyebrows are like, what's going on here? But it covers a lot. Did that ever weird you out? Or did you ever grapple with that? Because you've been in the trenches with this stuff. Was it ever to you am I looking at this right? Are these things true? Because there's so little things, at least in my limited scope of knowledge, that span such a wide array of improving health.
Yeah, well, I love my nature is just to understand things, and so it was always looking for trying to understand why is this, and the reason it makes sense is because all of these things are tied together at the cellular level, and so a lot of these things are driven by oxidative stress and inflammation at the cellular and even at the mitochondrial level. They just manifest themselves in different ways if it's happening in your reproductive organs or in your brain or your muscles or your heart or your liver, and so people think of these as different, and maybe you have a specific pharmaceutical that goes in and targets a symptom or some downstream effect of that process. But if you can work upstream at the kind of ancient source of this in your cells, that's kind of the reason that you can have this profound effect, and the fact that astaxanthin is distributed throughout the whole body. So you get it, we've done studies showing it gets to your liver. You have to do animal studies for this to actually sample tissues, because you can't take a human heart or liver or brain, but you can see that it gets to the brain, gets to the heart, gets to the liver, gets to, all throughout your body. And so if it's in all of these locations that are susceptible to damage, and then gets into not just the outer membrane of the cell, but also, like I said, the internal nuclear membrane that protects your DNA, the membranes of the mitochondria that promote energy or handle all of your energy production. These are all the locations that are susceptible to damage by oxidative stress and inflammation. And if you're in all those locations and you're not doing something that's chronically activating or inhibiting, but you're just kind of getting rid of the excess bad stuff, but allowing things to function normally, then you can have an impact on all these different areas of health. If it's in your brain, if it's in your heart, your muscles, your joints. And so that's why it has this common thread of benefits. And so that's why some people thought initially, it seems like snake oil could, but it's not actually doing a million different things. It's doing one core thing.
Right.
It's
in
just
a lot of places.
Yeah. It's if you sleep well, or if you eat well, or if you exercise, it's not just one benefit. It's kind of whole body benefits. And it's the same type of concept with this.
Absolutely. Well, I love that. Okay. Stunning. Physical side. When it comes to, obviously we've got a lot of longevity data on astaxanthin, but in the here and now, if we have athletic people that are trying to do big, crazy, fun things, is astaxanthin something that can help with performance?
Oh, yeah. So endurance, recovery, there's all types of interesting data there. So there was a study in competitive cyclists looking at how far they could ride or, how long they could ride, time to exhaustion at 75% of their VO2 max. So pretty
So not
intense.
chill.
Yeah. So
Not
they're
a chill
going,
day.
yeah, I guess it wouldn't be all out, but
Right.
75% is pretty,
Right.
pretty intense. And they're trained and they're competitive. And the placebo group was able to go like an hour and 12 minutes. So pretty long
Yeah.
time. The group with the astaxanthin went like an hour and 25 minutes, which was like an 18% improvement.
That's pretty significant for cycling.
Meaningful, yeah. And so any type of endurance, if it's cycling or if it's running or, rowing or whatever other type of endurance activity, there would be benefits there. And some of the earlier users of astaxanthin were the Ironman triathletes in Kona, where we and
That's dope.
another company were the first two companies back. So I've been in this since high school.
No way.
And and so
for what? Why? Just interested.
Summer job, yeah. And
no
so
way. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I was
That's
working in
cool.
the ponds, and kind of got in, kind of immersed in the science and got more onto like working with the research teams and development and all of this stuff. But
so
yeah, some of the early users were the Ironmen who were looking for any edge that they could,
Oh,
and
they're like, I'll hang upside down by my toenails
endurance
if I have
and
to.
recovery. Yeah, exactly. And so unfortunately, it's not like a banned substance. It's a safe thing. It's a natural way to kind of restore normal function, because a lot of like performance enhancing drugs are doing things that are like superhuman, that are not normal, that maybe you give you benefit but have a side effect,
for it in
and that's
some
why
way.
they're banned, because they want to promote safe sporting, and so this is something that's kind of like a natural, healthy performance enhancing agent, because it's kind of allowing you to optimize and perform to the best of your ability, which is otherwise maybe compromised. Even things like muscle health, your muscle cells can become damaged with intense exertion and exercise. It can actually leak out things into the bloodstream that you can measure as signs of muscle damage, and those types of measures were also reduced on astaxanthin.
Without impeding performance.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Great.
And then people do ask like, oh, what about, like muscle growth? There's studies actually in, this was in older adults, but it was looking at sarcopenia, which is where you lose muscle mass and strength over time, which is a major factor with aging. And just by the way, some people think, like you hear about grip strength as a sign of longevity, but then they just go and train grip strength. And it's like, okay, well, that's not.
It's like, can you sit on the toilet and get back up? Because I think that's going to be a little more important.
Yeah, that's more of like grip strength is a manifestation of your overall health and strength. It's not like, well, if I just train my grip strength, then I'll live
Everything's
longer.
fine.
Yeah, and so,
I'm so glad you said that.
so with that study, they actually showed that they helped to improve muscle strength and size.
Wow.
So they had a group of older adults that were doing some training, but either with or without astaxanthin, and the group with astaxanthin had increased muscle size and strength.
That's
so
awesome.
it helped to promote that, and it impacts certain pathways involved in aging, like mTOR, the target of rapamycin, and others. And so sometimes, like mTOR can be involved when it's activated in building, tissue and things, and then inactivated can, kind of lead to longevity benefits. But people think that, okay, well, if you're inhibiting that, then maybe you're going to have impaired muscle development. But astaxanthin is kind of like, again, not an all or nothing, all on, all off. And so you can have healthy levels to promote, synthesis of proteins and muscle growth, but not to the extent that you're impacting, overall health. So it seems to be kind of like that Goldilocks, that kind of balance of allowing things again to function normally. So performance wise, endurance, recovery promotes improved sleep, which if you're sleeping better, you're recovering
sleep is
better.
One of the biggest ones.
Because a lot of people think, oh, I just want to train harder, but a huge aspect of training is recovery. So you can train harder the next day and not be injured and at a higher level on a continual basis. And so that's another major aspect. And then there haven't been studies looking at like young bodybuilders, for example. But again, extrapolating from the study in older adults, looking at, okay, does it support muscle strength and size? And it does, then that would indicate that it should be beneficial for younger people in the gym as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of athletes use it too.
I could see that for sure. And like even the way that I look at clients is very similar. I'm like, okay, how can I increase the total recovery and like happiness of your body? Because when I do that, muscle building, fat loss, all of that will be easier. Like I use the like trainability and recoverability are like this. And if your recoverability goes down, your trainability goes down. And if you try to surpass your recoverability with your trainability, you're going to run into problems.
Yeah.
So if there is something where it's like, hey, this might not be directly like a fat loss supplement or a muscle building supplement or whatever, but it improves the total state of your body, we're going to have a better time with the things that you want because it's a whole system that works as one. So when the whole system is healthier, the goal, it's still hard on its days or whatever, but it's easier to achieve.
Yeah, and you're going to stay in rhythm because if
100%.
you get injured and you need to take, a few days or a week off, then you just fall into, bad habits and
Right.
don't go to the gym anymore or eat whatever. And then, it just kind of is like this domino effect. And if you can just stay in the zone and rhythm of like going to the gym or whatever, going on runs, whatever is, your activities of choice. And then when you are working out more, then you're going to want to eat healthier and all, it just goes hand in hand. And so, yeah, it's helping, I think, to maintain that just healthy, ongoing lifestyle and healthy habits.
Absolutely. So we touched on this a little bit. You talked about skin. I want to talk about beauty. So when it comes to astaxanthin and beauty, first off, it's actually funny. When I was looking into astaxanthin more, it's been kind of listed, and I want to use this phrase carefully, among other, I think like CoQ10, vitamin C, vitamin E, as like internal sunscreen. Can you talk about that? What does that mean?
Yeah, so actually many years ago it was marketed in that way.
Really?
And because it does protect against damage to your skin from the sun. The problem is some companies in the space actually were dinged by the FDA from that because that's technically that's like a disease or drug type of claim that you have to have like actual kind of from a regulatory standpoint be kind of like under the umbrella of like sunscreen products to do that. And so but also technically it doesn't absorb the UV light itself. And so it's not like a sunscreen or a sunblock.
Right.
But what it does do is when your skin absorbs that UV light, like we talked about earlier, where certain molecules are photosensitive in your skin cells and kind of become, kind of transferred into this higher energy state that then react with oxygen, create singlet oxygen, which is a type of reactive oxygen species that can damage the lipids, the proteins, the DNA in your skin cells that leads to unhealthy skin, wrinkles, fine lines, all of these things over time. Dark spots are kind of signs of damage to your skin. And astaxanthin helps to stop that process. So before the singlet oxygen can damage those components of your cells, astaxanthin can go in and quench that singlet oxygen by, again, absorbing that energy, vibrating it out as heat, and then just going on its way. And it's probably the most potent singlet oxygen scavenger in nature. Like compared to vitamin C, it was like 6,000 times stronger.
Wow.
And like, hundreds of times stronger than vitamin E and beta carotene and CoQ10 and basically all the other antioxidants. There's data showing that it really is like an effective singlet oxygen scavenger, which is a primary reactive oxygen species in skin. And so it is kind of like, you could think of it as like an internal sunscreen in that sense, but it doesn't replace, external topical sunscreen or sunblock because that is helping to actually block the UV light itself. But nevertheless, you're still going to absorb some. And not everyone, even though it is good practice to put it on every day, not everyone puts it on. Like they put it on when they go to the beach or they're going outside for hours, but just everyday exposure, walking around or in the car.
Right, like it's cloudy
it's
today. Nobody's thinking about putting on sunscreen.
Exactly, but
like,
you're still exposed.
Yeah.
And so it's always, kind of hitting your skin cells. And if you can protect it internally with astaxanthin, that definitely goes a long way. And so there's human data with both oral and topical applications of astaxanthin.
Really?
So there are a few cosmetic products, primarily in Asia that use a little bit of astaxanthin, but because it's a bright red pigment, you can't put too much in because then you're gonna be putting on like, oh, here's my beautiful cream, and then it's like all red.
It's like looks like you got sunburn.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the challenge. But fortunately, you can take it orally and it gets to your skin, so you don't have to put it on topically. Although it wouldn't hurt if you can have an appropriate formulation that works. And I have seen some, and I've tried some that are not bright red. But then it's also like, is there really enough in there
do we have this in the way that we need?
Yeah. And so, but
gives itself away.
Yeah. And so, but there's data showing that there was increased moisture content, elasticity, reduced wrinkles and fine lines, and so all of those types of benefits with skin. With astaxanthin.
With even just oral use.
With oral, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So like I think especially too, as women, we think some of the only ways, and don't get me wrong, I love my Botox. I'm super, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But like the more that I've even just personally gotten interested in various longevity things, I'm like, not to be that person, but these things make me prettier.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really have to do anything crazy
Yeah.
or spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on Botox or filler or whatever. I get less of that than I've ever gotten in my life. And I'm like, I wonder if this stuff has anything to do with it. But then when you say it logically, it makes sense. If it's slowing down or assisting what are typically seen as signs of decline, whether it's fine lines, wrinkles, dullness, collagen, whatever, then it's like, oh, of course, that actually just makes sense. If it's doing all of the things internally, then the stuff externally is going to show that in some way.
Yeah. And so, for instance, like collagen can be damaged by oxidative stress and inflammation. And so if you are reducing that oxidative stress and inflammation, you're protecting against the collagen degradation that leads to, sagging skin and wrinkles and things like that. And so, yeah, again, if like you said, if you can protect your skin, like if you think of like a car, and again, like if you protect the body panels, rather than going into the body shop and replacing them or kind of pounding out the dents and repainting them and doing all that stuff, like cosmetic procedures, like if you can just keep it healthy, you're gonna be able to be in a much better position. And not to say that you can't do other things on top of that, but it's just like you said, a much more cost-effective way and kind of natural way to optimize your skin health, for as long as possible.
Yeah, because how old are you?
44.
Your skin looks fucking great.
Oh, I've never had great skin, but I mean,
it looks fantastic. I'm like, there's a glow. Like, there's not really. I was like, it's the Astaxanthin.
I'm glad I'm glowing. Yeah,
you're a good poster child.
Yeah.
But no, that all makes so much sense. So when it comes to maybe like pairings, are there any things? I know you already mentioned omega-3s. Any things that astaxanthin taken with astaxanthin helps those things, or any things that are like common pairings? I know creatine is super popular in the fitness space, but anything you can think of that these things are really, really complementary?
Yeah. Well, the omega-3s make sense because of protecting against the oxidation internally in the body. I think of it as it's also just it's a foundational supplement that everyone should be taking. And so if a lot of people are taking multivitamins or mineral products, like it would be a great complement to that. But even protein, creatine, it goes hand in hand with all of that. Even like with creatine, it's interesting. A lot of people don't necessarily know, but like when energy is produced in your cells, it's in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which has 3 phosphate groups. But when energy is utilized, that phosphate is taken off and it becomes a diphosphate, ADP.
Taking me back to my degree.
Or AMP monophosphate. And so your body has systems like AMPK, this pathway to detect that ratio of like, mono versus tri, and then you kind of responds accordingly to conserve energy or produce. And in the case of creatine, you can have a form of it called phosphocreatine, where it actually is kind of bonded with phosphate. That is kind of like if you have too much energy or enough energy, excess ATP, the creatine can take a phosphate and kind of store it. And then when you need it for a quick burst of energy, it can give the phosphate back, to help convert ADP to ATP. But it needs the help of another enzyme, creatine kinase, for that process to happen. And astaxanthin protects against the loss of creatine kinase. Like I mentioned earlier with the muscle cells that get damaged and leak things out in the blood, that creatine kinase can leak out. And so astaxanthin helps to keep that intact and allow that healthy energy production with creatine and phosphocreatine. So kind of interesting little tangent there. But yeah, so I think it's a good way to think of it as it's a great complement to virtually anything, because it should be something foundational that everyone is taking. So kind of whatever you're taking is probably a good complement for it. Unfortunately, there aren't really any contraindications or other things where it's been demonstrated that, if you take this together, it's going to have some side effect. So just like with salmon, like you probably could eat salmon with virtually anything. It's not like some people, you can't eat grapefruit, because it impacts certain metabolic pathways, and that can impact how your, drugs or other things are kind of functioning in the body and cleared from the body. But there's lots of other reasons why you might take, say, astaxanthin with things like lutein or zeaxanthin for eye health, or you may take it with other interesting longevity agents. There's like urolithin A or like C15 or kind of NAD precursors. I mean, there's lots of different products that people may take for longevity. And so this would make sense in that type of a stack, because they all are complementary in the sense of promoting longevity. But then there's things like, rapamycin and other longevity agents that are touted as, oh, they can extend life, which, by the way, the NIH ITP program, which people probably haven't heard of necessarily, but it's probably the gold standard in assessing mammalian lifespan. And it's conducted by a group that's funded by the NIH, and it's at 3 different institutions. And so it's like run in parallel, in triplicate, with thousands of mice each year that are specially bred for assessing lifespan. Not your typical inbred laboratory mice that are not really relevant to humans for complex things like aging, like maybe a very specific disease indication where you modify them genetically or whatever and look at, can I impact this, and then have a hint before then trying it in humans.
Wow.
In this case, it'd be great to test longevity or lifespan in humans, but it would take decades. Start us now and then see us, in 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Yeah. And so we cross our fingers and we'll see, in the next century.
Right.
But in this case, mice only live a few years. And so you can have a better, kind of time to turn over research and figure out, okay, did this agent work or not? And so things like rapamycin, metformin, acarbose, and a handful of other agents that are essentially repurposed drugs
have demonstrated. You have to get like a prescription.
Not only get a prescription, but they're used for other reasons that, are not, like in the case of rapamycin, an old drug that was repurposed as like an immunosuppressant for like organ transplants. It just turns out it happens to extend lifespan, but it also has, safety issues and side effects and tolerability issues.
Right, and accessibility issues.
Yeah. And so, but the same program at the NIH called the ITP, the Interventions Testing Program, was like one of the key programs that really validated rapamycin as a longevity agent. Like that was one of the key programs that showed repeatedly that rapamycin worked. But over the last 20 or so years that this program has been active, nothing like astaxanthin has actually worked to extend lifespan, but astaxanthin was selected back in 2019 based on research that we conducted with some collaborators at the University of Hawaii, showing that we impacted the FOXO3 gene, which is like an anti-aging gene that reduces like cardiovascular inflammation and other things. But it's a gene that was discovered through the Honolulu Heart Program, where they followed thousands of Japanese American men for decades and looked at why they became sick or died at every doctor's office visit and lab tests, and had this huge kind of database of information on this population. And they found out that those that lived the longest, the healthiest, had this particular form of FOXO3. If you have that form, you're the most likely to live to 100 healthy. And everyone has the gene, but not everyone has that type of the gene. And basically the gene that's the most beneficial is the one that's kind of the most active. And it turns out that astaxanthin activates that gene in that collaboration that we did with the University of Hawaii. And so based on
That's dope.
Yeah, plus other model organisms where astaxanthin extended lifespan in worms and flies and yeast, which are like basic research things that live, days, and then you can see, oh, it extended life or not, and then you can knock out certain genes and see, okay, if it no longer lives as long, maybe it impacted longevity through that particular gene. And it turns out that in the mice, in the worms, they have their version of FOXO3 that if you knock out that gene, they no longer have the life extension. And so it really seemed like potentially astaxanthin was having a major impact through this FOXO3 gene. And so based on all that research, the NIH ITP program selected us to test astaxanthin in their model, to supply astaxanthin to them. So we sent them product over multiple years so they could incorporate it into the chow for the mice. And it turns out that astaxanthin did extend the lifespan in that model. And that was the first time in that 20 plus year history where something that's not just like a repurposed drug actually extended lifespan more than 10%. And now you have something that extended life, but also has exceptional safety and tolerability, and has impacts on health outcomes and health span rather than just lifespan.
I was going to say, like everything we've talked about,
heart, brain,
it's not just lifespan.
Yeah.
Like the health span is covered.
Yeah, and so you're living hopefully longer, but also healthier. And so that was really interesting. And one caveat there is the biggest effect was actually in the males, and because there actually is typically a difference in lifespan between males and females, and there are some hormonal differences that impact longevity, and even it turns out it's kind of a little bit strange to discuss, but like if they castrate the males in mice, they live they typically live like much longer like the females. And so there's something going
No
on with
way.
them. So
Wow.
that's not going to be a popular
Right, no.
commercialized
Nobody's
longevity
doing that.
approach.
The men are like, I'll die.
Yeah,
It's fine.
yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, taking me a decade earlier. But it turns out that, yeah, with astaxanthin, it allowed the males to basically catch up to the females.
Wow.
The females actually still lived a little bit longer also,
Yeah.
although it wasn't
Just the
statistically significant.
magnitude, yeah.
Yeah, so they lived slightly longer if you look at the curve.
Mhm.
But in terms of statistically significant extension, it was the males who caught up. Still not quite. So the females live a little bit longer,
We're
but
still winning.
closer.
We're
closer.
still winning, guys.
Yeah. So that was a really interesting result. But again, it goes back
Wow.
to if you are taking other things for longevity, this could really be a great complement and is given this NIH program, which is like the gold standard for looking at lifespan in a mammal, in mice, which again is with thousands of mice at multiple sites in
Mhm.
parallel. You can't buy your way into the program and kind of
Right.
doctor the results to look good. I mean, like they're
Mhm.
doing it and they're going to publish it good or bad.
Either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are co-authors on the paper with them just because we supplied the material and then helped them
Mhm.
figure out how much to dose and help them with writing up some of the background information on astaxanthin for the paper. But, they conducted the study and the results are their results.
Wow.
And so other agents, like even like an NAD precursor, NR, was tested
Mhm.
and didn't work. Metformin, which goes in and out of vogue for longevity,
Yeah.
didn't work there. Like green tea, even omega-3s, resveratrol, which is a popular thing for
Mhm.
many decades, was tested there, didn't extend lifespan. So a lot of things that are popular have
Yeah,
been tested
getting-
and didn't work, at least for lifespan.
Right.
And maybe they have
Yeah.
other benefits, but with astaxanthin and
Wow.
in particular our form that we supplied to them, it did work there. So that was really exciting. So going back all the way to your question, I think it complements virtually
Just about
any
anything.
stack, any approach, and I think it benefit virtually everyone. And
Yeah, and would be more foundational than complementary.
yeah,
Based on
yeah.
everything that I'm
I think-
gathering, I'm like, oh, so we
yeah.
should be doing this every day.
Yeah, it's because
this should be a priority.
yeah,
just
exactly.
like we prioritize omega-3s.
Yeah, and because you're at risk, to oxidative stress inflammation every day for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
And even if you optimize your life perfectly, you're still going to probably have, some oxidative stress inflammation. It's probably impossible to completely mitigate it. And so this really helps. And fortunately, it doesn't swing the pendulum in a way that puts you into a bad zone. It's not like, oh, I'm healthy, so I don't need it. It's more like, yeah, you're healthy, so you want it to stay healthy.
that way.
And then in terms of dosing, yeah, you can take 1 or 2 12 milligram capsules a day. And based on when we looked at the blood levels of astaxanthin in that NIH longevity study versus the blood levels that we've seen in human studies that we've conducted, that kind of gets you a similar amount of astaxanthin actually into your bloodstream. Because some people try to take the dose, that was fed to the mice and then calculate based on the size of the mouse, the size of the human, and figure out, okay, I'd have to eat like spoonfuls of
It's
it.
a lot of math.
Yeah, but it turns out that humans absorb astaxanthin and carotenoids in general much better than mice or other animals. And so we're lucky in that respect. And so we can take a relatively much lower dose, but still have efficacy and benefits.
Amazing. So you said just 1 to 2 capsules per day.
That's the baseline
Love
for
that.
basic health and longevity. But for people that are high performers and maybe doing intense exercise, or maybe have certain biomarkers that they're trying to target, whether it's inflammatory biomarkers, oxidative stress biomarkers, even lipids, where I mentioned earlier that reducing HSCRP is really important, but we and oxidized LDL is important, but we also saw reductions in just normal LDL and blood pressure and other things. And so any of those things, if you get your blood work done routinely, and a lot of people maybe don't start doing it until they get to some older age, but it has become more accessible. And I think for those that want to start earlier, it makes a lot of sense. And so whenever you do get those measured, if there are things that are, not in healthy zones, then you could potentially titrate your dose. And for instance, we did a study with 96 milligrams.
I was going to ask you, is there like an upper where you would cut it off?
Not an upper where you cut it off. It's more from a practical standpoint. Like we haven't seen safety issues at higher doses where it's like, oh, too much and you have some really bad effect. It's more like it's just not convenient to take so much, or a cost or whatever. But in terms of, data, we saw at 96 milligrams, which is 8 12 milligram capsules, we saw the best results there in terms of oxidized LDL, blood pressure, LDL, cholesterol coming down. And anecdotally, there's a lot of people that even take more that are using it for athletic, pursuits where they feel better mobility, endurance, recovery at higher doses. And so given the safety, it's something that allows you to start at whatever 1 or 2 a day.
Right.
Importantly, with a meal, because that promotes absorption.
Probably a fat-containing meal.
Yeah. But then you can, after a few months, assess based on whatever is of relevance to you. It could be, cognition and brain fog. It could be, endurance or recovery. It could be sleep. It could be your HSCRP level. But whatever it is, follow those things that matter to you that you're paying attention to, and then you can adjust from there up or down. And maybe you can say, well, what if I go lower? And then maybe it's like, oh no, I'm not as good anymore, so let me put it back up higher. So.
Yeah, or maybe theoretically, if somebody maybe had something like high LDL, high CRP, whatever, and they took that higher dose, then they retested and it had lowered, could they start titrating down to maybe like a more reasonable maintenance dose for them?
Yeah, and then just monitor and then see if you can keep it down. And maybe there's other lifestyle factors that also need to get in check. And so, or even people, for instance, like that are taking Ozempic or other types of related drugs, maybe that helps them lose some weight, but then you don't want to stay on that forever and you want to modify, your diet and lifestyle. And so maybe that helps give you that initial boost, but then you have a healthier, diet and lifestyle thereafter.
Absolutely. That should absolutely be the goal 100% of the time. Oh my God. How cool is this little thing? So final formal question, then I'll ask you the question I ask everybody else. Why do you think it's not more popular? If it does all of these things, why is it not more mainstream?
Yeah, it just hasn't had a major corporate push. There's been no big, corporation like pharma company or consumer health company that has marketed a product with it. It is just, a natural product, and so you can't own the molecule. And so it makes it harder. There's been some supplements on the market, and as I mentioned, going back to this was the year 99, 2000 timeframe where I was finishing up high school, and that's when I was part of a team that launched one of the first 2 supplements with Astaxanthin in the U.S. market. And so it's been on the market for many years. But a lot of people don't really know about it. And at the time, there were less than 200 peer-reviewed papers, but now there's more than 4,000 peer-reviewed papers. So the science has really blown up over the years. There were no human studies at that point, and now there's 100. And so the science has evolved. It's just that it hasn't breached into the mainstream, the consumer general community, and that's really what we're trying to do is create awareness and talk about it.
Guys.
That's why we're here. Yeah, exactly. And so I'll mention that. So I used to work in the ponds growing the microalgae in that form because that's the most prominent natural form of producing it. But then you have to extract the astaxanthin from the algae, and you end up with maybe 10% or so astaxanthin.
Wow.
And so you still have a lot of other stuff from the algae. And the problem is it can vary from batch to batch. And also if you're growing in open ponds, it's at risk for contamination from, VOG from the volcano nearby, or airplane fuel and vapor for the airport nearby, or birds and rodents. And so there are some groups doing entirely enclosed production in closed tubes, not open to the outdoors. So you reduce the contamination risk, but you're still having variability potentially batch to batch, and you're still ultimately only going to get 10%, or maybe if you really do a lot of processing, maybe 15 or even 20%, but you're still a lower percent astaxanthin, and then the rest is other stuff from the algae. Then you put it in some oil and then put that in a soft gel capsule. In our case, we decided to actually look at pharmaceutical research for about a decade and look at, this has all these interesting benefits. Could we actually develop this with really high purity, really good absorption, and potentially develop it as a drug for certain diseases? And so we did that for about a decade and actually ran into the global financial crisis of 2008, which really wrecked, the whole mortgage crisis that people may remember or may not, but it kind of derailed our ability to finance and continue that program, even though we made a lot of really cool progress and demonstrated, for instance, in multiple studies that we prevented strokes, prevented blood clots, both primary and secondary occlusion of arteries in rodents and dogs, as well as other measures of cardiovascular health, plaque buildup in arteries that we imaged. We had all types of really cool data there for drug development purposes, and just kind of ran out of the ability to raise the capital to do it. And if that financial crisis had not happened, because we literally had a term sheet from a major San Diego-based venture capital firm that was led by one of the icons of the biotech industry, who created one of the first companies there, to fund us through a major proof of concept in humans. We got the term sheet in August of 2008, which is literally the exact month that the financial crisis blew up. And so if we had happened to maybe get that term sheet 6 months earlier, year earlier, we would probably have an astaxanthin drug on the market a decade ago, or more. And so it's just unfortunate.
That's crazy. And there still isn't a drug form of it.
And so because the ability to fund that, and also a lot of our patents from the early days started to get a little bit older. And so like we talked about it, why hasn't it happened? Well, people, if they're going to invest a lot of money to develop it, you want to have some proprietary protection. And so with the patents in the pharma space kind of getting a little bit older after we kind of weathered that storm, we decided ultimately, let's come back to the supplement world and bring our knowledge from the pharma research and manufacturing and kind of bring a highly pure, well-absorbed form to the market and communicate the science, but do it as a supplement. Because for a while, we were talking about the science on the pharma side, but then we'd have to be just recommending other supplements out there that weren't even our own. And we're like, okay, well, let's bring one that kind of we know has great quality and can help people. And so that's what we launched many years back, was kind of a pharmaceutical grade type of astaxanthin that's highly pure and well-absorbed. And then we took one of the leading algal forms and gave the same dose to a group of human volunteers and then measured their blood levels for how much astaxanthin was in there. And it turns out that with the same group of people, just like spaced 1 week apart so that they could take the algal form, measure the blood, and then go home and have it all wash out of their system so there's no more detectable again a week later, give them ours with the same dose, and we got 3 times the amount absorbed in. So same dose from a milligram standpoint.
It's more absorbable.
It's
more bioavailable in some way.
Yeah. And so it's just way easier for the body to absorb in. And so rather than passing it through into the toilet, you're going to get 3 times more, both at the maximum concentration point, like 6 or 9 hours later after taking it, but also the total exposure over 24 hours, like how much, if you add up all of the astaxanthin, every time point that was measured, it was 3 times more. And it was less variable from person to person in that same group of people. So that's really what differentiates the form that we have, is really that bioavailability, the purity, the consistency. And it was the form that was tested in that NIH program that, we supplied. So that's really, a key difference there. But ultimately, I think that hopefully what we're doing contributes to more awareness around astaxanthin, and then it does become more of a mainstream thing.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Because I'm like I said, I, even just in my own strategy more in the last couple of years, I'm like, okay, I don't want to just take 5,000 different things for fitness purposes. I want a few, because I'm forgetful, but a few targeted things that will cover a broad array of things in my body. That's why I like urolithin A so much. That's why I like fatty 15 so much. And now having this in, I'm like, oh, it feels like the Avengers of longevity in supplement form. I'm like, I think more of us should care about this, because it's easier in the sense that, again, you're not taking 5,000 different things, but it's like, oh, I don't want to say root cause anything, but if you can get down to a deeper level within the body, so many, you talked about at the very beginning, it's it seems too good to be true, but it's no, it's just acting on all of these different places in the body because it's going everywhere, but in its special way.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Okay, this has been incredible. I have a code for X-ray. I don't remember it off the top of my head, so I will put that in here after this. But David,
I think it was M-Dunk.
M-Dunk, that's typically what most of the codes are.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, if you don't hear me interject in the next 5 seconds and correct it, it'll also be before the show. But code M-Dunk, like I said, I've been taking it for the last month. I feel, like I said, calmer and clearer, and just kind of there's monkeys playing cymbals in my brain most days.
It sounds fun.
And no, it's not fun, especially when you're running a business.
Yeah.
But no, that has calmed down. My recovery from training is fantastic. I get sometimes 2 to 3 hours of REM and deep sleep a night. So I'm we have good things happening. So I have been loving it so far. Obviously, I do a lot of other things for my health, but no. You guys have heard me talk about longevity stuff for the last couple of years, and I'm so glad that this came into my life and to keep using it. Actually, that made me think of one more question. Time to use. Is there a test period that people should give themselves? When I do anything, I'm hey girl, give it at least a month. But with something like this, is it hey, you should give this at least this amount of time?
I would say at least a month, but ideally 3 months.
Beautiful.
The studies that we've done in humans looking at the oxidized LDL and HSCRP and other things, that was 3 months of dosing. A lot of the animal studies where we've demonstrated benefits have also been 12 weeks or 3 months. So that's really the ideal time frame. And if you are measuring biomarkers, you're probably not measuring them on a monthly basis.
Right, I hope not.
It might be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, yeah. But things that you can feel subjectively, like in your case, your mood, your sleep, your endurance recovery, all those things, you can feel those more quickly. And some people actually feel within the first few days benefits on, in particular, joints, how your joints are feeling if you have some joint issues. Maybe used to be a competitive athlete and you already have some nagging injuries or other things. And so, those are things that people do report potentially quicker. But sometimes it's also a matter of finding the right dose. And so you want to give yourself at least a month, if not a few months, and then maybe adjust your dose to see how you're doing. And so,
Absolutely.
but it's not one of those one and done, like, oh, I tried it for a
Right.
week, doesn't work for me.
Pretty much nothing
I'm
is
good.
like that.
Yeah,
Like you cannot tell that with anything.
I mean, unless it's like a stimulant or something.
Right. And
And
you're
people,
like, I feel that.
I feel it. Yeah, yeah. And so we've even joked like, oh, we should put, some caffeine in there so people feel it, and then by the time it builds up in the system, then they're actually
Right.
having the long-term benefits,
Right. And
but,
you're like, I like
but no, we
this.
don't have any of that. It's just healthy, kind of supporting energy,
Yeah.
production, mitochondrial health. Yeah.
I love it. It's simple, it's clean, and it does a lot of things, as we've just spent the last hour talking about. So, Code Embody. And then my last question for you that I ask everybody that comes on the show, it's based off the name of the show, which is Embody Radio. So, David, what is one thing you're working on embodying in your life right now, and how are you doing that?
I am just working on always being just present in what I'm doing and not getting caught up in the past or the future and not being fragmented and pulled into many different directions, because I don't think you can be as effective if you're not just in the zone in that moment.
Where your feet are.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Beautiful. All right, this is the opportunity. Plug away. If people want to find you, if they want to find AX3, plug away. Where can they find you? Where can they purchase with Code Embody? Of course, all the things.
Yeah. Well, I think it was M-Dunk, but we can also do an Embody if you want.
I said it wrong. You're right. It's M-Dunk. It's M-Dunk.
Well, we'll just have both codes. People can use whatever.
So then if y'all forget, it wasn't me, it was you.
But so our website is ax3.life. And so there's no .com, but we use .life. So that's the website.
It's unique.
And then on social media, on Instagram, it's also ax3.life. And then personally, I just have my own Dave Wadmel, so people can follow any of those and check us out.
Are you giving us the behind the scenes in Hawaii on your personal Instagram?
A little bit. I just opened it up. I figured give a little behind the scenes. And so, that's the goal, is to give a little more of the story behind it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was action-packed. This was great.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.